Welcome back, warrior family. We are happy to be with you. I need to fix mine. Yeah, we need a new line for you.
Yeah. Just like it's the thing that comes, but it's,
I secretly love it just because it makes me laugh.
I know, me too, but it's not what I want.
Hello, family, warrior family. We're so glad that you're here with us this week.
And every week.
And every week. You're right. Thank you for that add-on. Every single week, we're glad that you're here. We are particularly excited because we spoke with a fabulous guest. Her name is Christine Iovelli. And before Abby jumps into a little bit of a recap of our convo, let me let everyone know just a little bit about who Christine is. Christine is a licensed mental health counselor in Florida. She specializes in treatment of anxiety and trauma. She's also a certified hypnotherapist. A fellow anxiety warrior, she struggled with anxiety most of her life. She was born and raised in Florida, and she currently lives in Lake Worth with her husband, Bryce, and their two boys, Charlie and Anthony. She used to work in addiction treatment centers and mental health clinics, but now works at home, so she's able to spend more time with her family. She is passionate about helping others with their mental health. So, Abby, tell us a little bit about this convo.
Yeah. So like I say, every week, this was a super fun conversation. Christine starts off by sharing how as a child, she didn't know she had anxiety, and that she was basically told she was lactose intolerant. She shares how her anxiety started to manifest more in college, with her swinging between this need to control everything in her life, including her food intake, to then using alcohol to let go of that control. And it was when she finally entered the mental health field that she realized that her anxiety was impacting her life. And then she got the help that she needed. And this help also helped her when she started to experience postpartum anxiety after having her first child. What was really interesting in this conversation is also how she speaks about using anxiety as a motivator. It's like this big energetic force that propels her to do the things, even though the fear is there with it. And this was just like a really empowering story about how she finds a way to be her own cheerleader on her anxiety journey.
Yes, such a great conversation. We cannot wait for all you warriors to hear it. Here she is. Welcome back, warrior family. We are joined by Christine. Christine, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Yay. Yay. We are thrilled to have you. We know that you're really close friends with one of our former guests, Zaina Minkara.
Yes,
so
I am.
she hooked this up, and we're really excited to learn more about you and what you do and your anxiety journey. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about how anxiety shows up in your life.
How it shows up in my life. Well, I would say I've had anxiety since I was a child. I didn't know it was anxiety, but it's definitely showed up for me from a very young age. It's definitely been one of those comfort things where it's like it's just always like driven me no matter what phase of life I've been in. It's just very comfortable. And I know a lot of people can probably relate to that. It's like when everything's peaceful, it's like it doesn't seem right. So anxiety is definitely something that drives me throughout my life for sure.
I love that you said that, right? Because I think so often, like when we talk about anxiety, we talk about like all the challenges, right?
Yeah.
And all the discomfort, right? And once in a while, like we've had guests say, like it's like comfortably uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
It's familiar.
It's familiar, yeah. And yet there's this like beautiful thing that you said where anxiety actually like drives you and motivates you. And so can you share a little bit more about that? Because sometimes we hear how anxiety holds us back, right? And so how does anxiety drive you?
Well, and I think this is a perception that I've gotten over the years. So before it was like, anxiety's bad. And it just felt really uncomfortable and I felt really awkward. But I would say as I've lived my life, experienced things, I see it more as a tool. Like, okay, it's there. I can either embrace it and just roll with it. And maybe it'll help me get spiked or excited to do something, or I can see it as this enemy and this bad thing that I should be embarrassed about. So even, preparing for this podcast, I'm like, oh my God, I can feel my anxiety kicking up, like my stomach's starting to get nervous. But I'm like, no, this is good. This is energy I'm bringing. So that's definitely a better perspective than seeing it as the enemy, because let's face it, we all have it. Like, we're anxiety warriors and we're going to live with it. So might as well embrace it.
Right. So it's like the noticing it and then using it, because it is energy and it's super strong. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's so strong. Like sometimes it like knocks us on our ass. Right. Like sometimes we're like laying on the floor, like, I can't handle this, or I think I can't handle it. Right.
Yeah.
And instead, this reframe of like, okay, I'm noticing all this. Let me put all of that energy forward to what I want to do.
Totally.
I have one more question. So it's so common in so many of our conversations with our guests that they've had anxiety since childhood, and they noticed something was wrong or different or uncomfortable or whatever, but they didn't know they had anxiety. So will you share a little bit about when you found out, like when you figured out, oh, all these things are anxiety?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was a kid, I was like going into the nurse a lot at school. I felt like I couldn't swallow food, and all of that was anxiety. But I thought, I mean, even the nurse was like, "Oh, you have lactose intolerance," so they prevented me from having like milk at school, and that was in elementary school. And so I was like, okay, they know better than I do. My parents never said, "Oh, this is anxiety," so I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I just felt uncomfortable, my throat felt tight, and all this. Anyways, so yeah, I just always felt like this anxious feeling and uncomfortability, and I would often think it was like some sort of a medical thing, so I go to the nurse. But when I really figured out it was anxiety, I was like kind of Googling things when I was in, I would say, late high school to early college, and going, oh my God, like this is me, like I have anxiety. And it was so nice to know that there's something like that, there's like a diagnosis, or these symptoms are something that other people experience. So it was kind of nice. It's like, finally, I figured out what it was. So it wasn't this like, just, whoa, I'm just being swept up by it. It's like, oh, this is it. And so that was really helpful. I remember being like, hey, Dad, Mom, I think I have this anxiety stuff. And they're like, oh, well, Christine, we have anxiety too. Like, we've had it all our lives. I'm like, really? Like,
this wasn't all lactose intolerance. What?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
That's so funny. You had said in our call that like your family, when you told your family, oh, this is what I've been dealing with my whole life, you always said that you had told me, you said that the worry, like the constant worry in your household, and like the energy and scattered busyness of your household was your norm. And so you just assumed like all families must be like this. All families must have this anxiety, that your parents didn't give you that language. And then once you realize, hey, look, Mom and Dad, I have what's known as anxiety, they were like, oh, we've had that. It's like, well, why didn't you talk to me about that?
Exactly. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
funny.
Even like some of my closest friends, I like looking back, I'm like, I'd go over to their house and they wouldn't have any plan. And it would just be like hanging out. I'm like, what? It was like so uncomfortable for me, because we always had like a list of like to-do lists, and here's the next thing, just very busy people and action oriented and just getting things done. And then like hanging out and just relaxing was like really weird. I'm like, what are we doing? Where are we going? Like, what's the time frame? Like, so those are the type of moments that I realized, like, oh, okay, not every family operates in this like major kind of taskmaster mode all the time. So it was kind of a big realization.
You just gave me a huge aha moment from like college, and there was one family I would always hang out with on the weekends, and they were always go, 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 go. And for me, that was a little bit foreign. Like I couldn't be, it was so draining. And like, I just had the aha moment, like, oh, wait, they were probably an entire anxious family. Like,
yeah.
Right. My family had a lot of energy too. I don't know that we were as like structured in terms of like, here's the list of things. I think that my mom always had that running ticker of like, here are all the things that we have to do and get done. She was definitely more of the anxious one. But I feel like it wasn't an aha moment, but I was just reflecting in my own head about like kids' houses I went to and how different they were from my house. Right. And so just getting that window, regardless of anxiety, getting that window into how other families sort of operate, what their day-to-day feels like. Like one of my best friends from childhood, her family was so quiet. They just didn't really talk to one another. And the dinner table was like torture for me because I'm like, my dinner table was like, whoa, whoa, like everyone's talking and chatting and laughing and it's story over here and music in the background. And her house was just like gentle music playing and everyone's eating and no one's really talking. I'm like, oh my God, when can I leave? When can I get out of here? So yeah, it's just so interesting to think about how our families impacted just the way we view, just the way children learn to view the world.
Yes,
absolutely.
From such a young age. So, all right, Christine. So share with us a little bit more about how anxiety shows up in your mind, body, and behaviors. You had told this really interesting story. You mentioned just now about heading into the nurse's office quite a bit. You told this very interesting story in our call about having that lump in your throat sensation, and you kind of drew it back to this one experience that you had. Can you just share with our listeners a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, I don't remember the exact time frame or exactly when, but I was at a friend's house. I was pretty young. And I had a choking experience, or I choked on a piece of steak, and it was like really traumatizing for me. And her like father had to jump over the table and like do the Heimlich and all this. And so after that, I had serious fears about like swallowing food, to the point where I would eat like nothing, I swear to you, than like mashed potatoes and gravy, and like anything soft food. So I would chew everything like to like make sure it was soft before I would swallow it, because I was afraid to choke. And that went on for like many years. And I'm just looking back and I'm like, God, like I wish I would have gotten some sort of help for that, like, wouldn't you think that? But my parents like never said like, oh, let's take you to like a therapist or anything like that. So I just kind of dealt with it and just sort of pushed through it and eventually started feeling more comfortable. But it was crazy.
Yeah. It's those like moments. I mean, I remember I choked on a carrot when I was like 4 or 5. And like, even to this day, every time I see a carrot, I think about choking, right? Like I'll still eat the carrot, but those moments really stay with you. What led you to start like not just eating mashed potatoes? Like when was that like was there a delicious food you were like, I got to eat this? Or were you like, I'm tired of just eating mashed potatoes? Or you kind of forgot about the fear of choking? Or
I think it was me pushing myself to like relax about it. But it wasn't any sort of formal like moment. It was just like, I'm kind of like sick of this. I'm going to try to get better and start eating better. And it eventually got better. But yeah, it was like really kind of like getting underweight. And I remember like my doctor, the pediatrician, being like, yeah, she's a little underweight. She needs to eat better. And so that was kind of a motivator too. And yeah, just eventually getting more comfortable with it. But again, I never got any formal help for that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is, I mean, it is really crazy how, I mean, especially like at around our ages growing up, like it was like, just get over it. You're fine. Right. It's like, actually my nervous system is not fine with this. But I also just wonder, like, one of the reflections from the grown-ups was like, oh, you're lactose intolerant. Right. And then like the doctor saying you're underweight. And I'm just wondering, like, what are all the different messages the grown-ups were giving you, since they totally were missing the piece about this being like anxiety, like.
Absolutely. And I just like was very somatic, like really focused on physical things. I remember watching like a video about like smoking, and I think it was in high school, and like the causes of how it affects your lungs and all that. And then I started having like anxiety about breathing and like difficulties breathing. So I think, in the beginning phases of my anxiety journey per se, it was just like all physical feelings. And I just didn't know that that was anxiety. I just didn't put 2 and 2 together because other people weren't telling me it was anxiety. Professionals weren't, pointing it out or checking on it, which I think today, the awareness of mental health symptoms are like so much better, which I think is amazing. Like your podcast is amazing because there's so many people here who are going to watch these episodes or listen to these episodes and go, oh, that's me. Oh, that is anxiety too. love that. I wish that back in the day when we were younger, that there was more of an awareness of it, instead of us thinking like, I can't breathe, I have breathing issues, or I have
Yes.
choking issues, or, tension issues. So it's, the awareness is getting better, I think, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really, I just think it's so important that as children, when we're seeking help to adults, and the message is like, again, I find it hysterical that you were told you're lactose intolerant. Like, that is so funny to me, in a not funny way.
Right.
But now we have all this stuff, like what you said, like you figured out there's nothing wrong with you by Google. Right. And so, we're getting a lot more information in mental health, but just how powerful grownups are, when they're with kids, and kids are trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Right. And it's a lot of power grownups hold.
And it's possible too. Like, you had that traumatic experience with the steak at your friend's house, and it's like, was that, I'm guessing that was never labeled as trauma, right? For you, at least not in that moment. Right. And so, like, just for everyone listening to just reflect on so many of the things that we went through as children, or at any points in our life that could be considered traumatic, especially in, a non-fully developed brain, will have a lasting impact on you, right? It's just like, imagine the little things. I know for me, and yes, it's true that we're anxiety warriors, so we feel things maybe a little bit more fully or deeply than some people. But like, if I have just like the slightest little, let's say, for example, I'm driving and I'm getting really close to the bumper in front of me, and maybe I'm distracted, and oh my gosh, I have to slam on my brake, and I come within like a couple inches of the bumper in front of me, and immediately my brain goes to, oh my God, what would have happened just now? And then I'm thinking about all the, even though nothing happened, everything's fine, my head just immediately goes to, I could have been killed, I could have died, I would have been stuck in this road, it's raining. Like, there would have been a million things going on in my head, right? And so, like, and that would sit with me for a good few weeks while I'd be driving, right? And so that, I feel like, just the concept of traumatic experiences needs to be sort of taught to children, taught to everyone at any age you can get it, right? But especially for young children. For you, I can't imagine how it couldn't have been helpful for you to learn that what you went through with that choking experience was very scary, that must have been terrifying. Like, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it, right? Like, how might that have changed all those years? I mean, I know you didn't just eat mashed potatoes for years, but like, maybe, and Abby just said she sees a carrot and still has a reflex. Like, and just a side note, I work in early childhood still, but I worked in early childhood as a teacher for a decade. And, uncooked carrots, that's not allowed in schools.
Yeah.
We were not allowed to serve that to the students, because there are so many more choking hazards.
Hot dogs too.
Now, hot dog. Yeah. There's a lot that you would be surprised about, actually, that it's, I mean, hot dogs, to me, that's not that surprising in a school or in an early childhood school. But yeah, I mean, it's, Anyway.
Oh yeah. And you're making me think about my kids now too. So it's like, I don't want to project my anxiety on them. That's part of my anxiety journey. So it's like, when my kids are eating foods, like, I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? And I just have to watch myself, because that anxiety I had with my choking experience can, be passed down to my kids. Absolutely. And so I'm like chopping his hot dogs into like tiny little morsels, things like that. I'm just, it's scary. And he did have one choking incident that was pretty scary, but we got through it. But it's like, I'm the adult now. I need to be the one that is helping him and supporting him. So that's one big motivator for me, is to really like help him with his anxiety instead of getting carried away with my own. Like, I want to be able to support him and see the signs with him.
I love that you're like, I can't put my anxiety on my kid, right? Like, that's my story, and now my kid can have their own story.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to teach them to be afraid to eat or chew or right. Yeah. But that's so hard. Let's just acknowledge that that's really hard too, right? It's hard to not project your own fears and anxieties that you cope with every day. Let's be honest. Out on the people around you, not just your children, but just the people that share a space with you, or that you work with, or whomever. All right. So, kind of keeping on with like the body and stuff, in our call, you shared that you had like this interesting pattern that you noticed showing up starting in your college days, when it came to food first and then alcohol later on. So just share with our listeners a little bit about this time of your life. I feel like so many people can relate to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was in college, the transition was really hard. That's one thing I'll say first and foremost. Like, and I'm sure a lot of anxiety warriors can relate. Anything that change is like, like, terrifying. So, going
Yeah.
to college was extremely scary for me, and that's when I started to, I guess, utilize like food as like a coping skill, like a negative coping skill. So and I'm a therapist, by the way, so you guys know. So I'll use like the therapy terms, coping skills and all this, but you know, it was a coping mechanism for me. And my friend was a personal trainer. And so I was like, got all excited about that. And so I started losing weight and like eating healthier. And I was like, I got like really obsessed with it. It was like a high that was like, oh wow, like every time I got on the scale and I would, lose a couple pounds. And so it turned into this eating disorder where I would literally count every single calorie, including like gum
Mm,
and grapes. I mean, it was so bad. And looking back, I'm like, how did I function like that? Like that
yeah.
was so unhealthy and my whole life was consumed by it. Like every moment of the day, like it has no room for people in my life. It was all like all consuming. So
Wow.
it was really bad. And the same with the alcohol kind of getting bad too, but it started with the eating. And I did get to a breaking point with that where I was I believe it was in my master's program for mental health. And
Mm.
I'm like learning about eating disorders. I'm like, check, check, check. Like, this is all me. Like, I'm learning once again that these problems are going on for me.
Yeah.
And I, was realizing like a big part of, mental health issues is like, how is it impacting your functioning? That's what you look at. If it doesn't
Mm.
impact your functioning, it's fine. But guess what? I was not eating dinners with my family because I couldn't count the calories in the food. So I told my
Wow.
husband with my mother-in-law and my husband's, parents, I'm like, I just can't. Like, I'm sorry, we got to do something else. And I didn't tell them because of the calorie thing. I just told Bryce, I'm like, I'm not doing that. And that was a moment for me where I'm like, wow, that's really bad. It's
Yeah.
affecting my relationships with other people. Like, this cannot go on.
Wow. Wow.
So I really was at that point, like, I need to change things. I got to that breaking point and changed. But then little alcohol kind of creeped in. So I had drank a little bit in college. My family history, my mom's an alcoholic. So I always
Mm.
had that fear, like, I don't want to become her. She has the alcohol issue. So I didn't drink at all up until college. And then I slowly drank a little bit more and a little bit more. And then I think after the eating disorder got better, it was like I had to jump to something else to obsess about because I've always like operated on obsession because it's
Yeah.
like then there's no ambiguity. It's like I'm focused on like the one thing that's going to make things better. If I eat perfectly, then everything's fine. It's like no, that's not the truth. In fact, it caused more anxiety than it helped. But with the alcohol, it's like, oh, I'm drinking, it makes me feel better. Okay, when's my next event to go out and drink?
Mm.
And it got to the point where, I was blacking out and I was feeling totally out of control, like ashamed. It was scary. So I'm like, okay, this one thing that was supposed to help my anxiety is now making my anxiety worse because I'm terrified that I lost control and I don't remember
Mm.
what happened to the night before. Um, so again, it was another breaking point that I got to with the alcohol, and I reached out to a friend because I worked in a rehab center, and she, I said, hey, I'm interested in a meeting. Do you know any good women's like AA meetings
Mhm.
in your area? And she's like, is this for a client, Christine, or is it for you? I'm like, it's for me. And she's like, absolutely. Like, let's get you connected. Let's do it. So
Mm.
I'm just so grateful that I was in the mental health field, getting my master's degree, going into the line of work that I did, because honestly, a lot of stuff I don't think I would have realized unless it was like in my face, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, I can relate with these people. This is so much like me. And then it's like slowly but surely I gained that awareness of like, oh, I have these issues. And it wasn't, bad because I had so much support and people that I work with that were in recovery in the recovery community. So then I was able to get help for that. So
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's just crazy how it morphed from like one thing to another. And it's like, I call it the whack-a-mole thing, where it's like, you have one thing that you're dealing with or struggling with, and then, you hit that down. Okay, that's better. And then something else pops up. So I feel like anxiety just shows up in so many areas, and so many different unhealthy coping, that you just have to be aware of those things. So
yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, first of all, I just really love how like you getting into mental health is what ultimately helped you with yours. You had this like, all of a sudden there's this knowledge placed in front of you, and there's this self-reflection of like, oh, wait, this sounds like me. Oh, this sounds like me. And because you are for mental health and like going into the mental health field, you didn't have the barriers, for like asking for help, which is so huge.
So awesome.
The other thing that like I heard in this story of like food and alcohol was like, I saw it as like a pendulum as you talked about it. And first it was like the hyper super controlling side, because anxiety likes to be in control, right? That controlling side of like the calories and the food intake and the working out and the weight, right? The losing weight. And then it just like swung to the, no, now I'm going to have alcohol and enjoy the feeling of alcohol and just be out of control and feel how horrible it feels to be out of control. Right. And so I heard this like pendulum of like going from one extreme of like control to the other of like no control, right? Losing.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And it's just, I feel like so many people can just relate to that. It's like, we replace one habit with another, but sometimes we're so like, no, I don't want to be like that anymore. We go to the other extreme.
Oh, absolutely. That is like 100% me. It's like all or nothing, right?
Yes.
It's like, you can't find that middle ground.
No.
Yeah. That balance is so hard to strike. And I love the beautiful visual of that, Abby, right? Of just the pendulum, right? I didn't come up with the visual, but right, my head kind of went to that same thing. It's like, it's very nitpicky and it's regimented and it's focused. And then it's like, well, I need to do the opposite of that because that wasn't working for me. So I'm going to be loose and, just see what it feels like to let go completely. I really feel like this is going to be a great kicking off point for the next question, which is, you mentioned just now and in our call, that it often takes you to reaching the breaking point, like the brink, before you do anything about it or make any changes. So I know that this is relatable for so many warriors. What does reaching the brink feel like or look like for you? And then what drives you in the long run to make a change, or what drove you?
That's a good question. So I think for breaking point, at least with my eating issues, was the impact that it was having on my relationships. So, it's one thing if like it's my stuff, but now it's starting to leak into my family life. And I realized just how much the alcohol, the eating issues, like the anxiety was really impacting my family. Like I can honestly say that it was a huge like barrier in front of me. And it was like, it was all about that. And I didn't even see the people around me. And I shared this story in my recovery story with alcohol, that it really became an obsession where it's like nothing else mattered, which is really scary that, your issues can come out like that. Because when I was obsessing over this and that, it's like, it was not, I wasn't focused on other people. It's like, I was consumed by that. Once I realized that and relationships improving, I could see that now I'm present with people that I care about, that I don't have this like monkey on my back or this obsession in my head. Like I can clearly talk to people and get on their level. And I could actually feel my feelings and express my feelings. I could have real conversations and just sit with my anxiety and express it and share it. It's just such a better way of living. Like I just, not that I'm perfect, of course I still have anxiety issues, but the change was like, wow, like I need to connect more with people, and I need to not be like isolated in this like cycle of obsession. It was just like I felt like a trapped feeling. So now I would say that was the breaking point, is just like feeling trapped, feeling isolated, feeling stuck in my head, and the breaking point of realizing like I don't want to live that way. I just don't. Like I want to be connected with the people that I love. Like that's what's most important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really sounds like you said, like there was a barrier up between you and the people you love, but it
Yeah.
also sounds like there was like a barrier between you and yourself because you said like I could finally feel my feelings.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
And so like,
Yeah.
right. So it's like sounds so like inner and outer loneliness because the anxiety was driving all of these different behaviors and obsessions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Christine. All right, let's move on to some of the ways that you like to or that work for you as far as coping with dealing with your anxiety.
So, coping wise, I see a therapist. So that's super helpful. One thing that I realized, like with my postpartum journey and having, babies, is I had a lot of postpartum anxiety with my first son. So this time around, I was like, I'm not playing around. Like, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I don't go into like a bad place. So
Yeah.
it's like you have that awareness of where you can go and like the coping skills that you need in order to get better.
Mhm.
So for me, it was the therapy. It was just taking a moment, even if it's just in the shower and like breathing. And I have this like aromatherapy spray, and I just love it. It's just like the scent of it is just so soothing. Like I can feel it like wash over me. And I do prayer in my shower, and my husband will come to the shower sometimes. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm praying. Like, give me a minute here." So I do that. I go to meetings. I have a sponsor in AA. She's super awesome. She's also an anxiety warrior. And just talking with her and sharing with her about my anxiety, I'm like, we're literally the same person. It's
Mm.
crazy how similar we are. And then just even like just sitting in the moment with my kids, just being mindful. I honestly can say like my kids have helped me because my family life was so rigid and all about like next thing, like task
Mm.
oriented. With my kids, they're like amazing. They're just so exuberant and all over the place. So it's like just sitting in that moment and like playing with them and
Yeah.
not caring like what we're doing next. There's no schedule. It's like just being in the moment. That mindfulness stuff like really works, and I that anxiety goes away when I'm just having fun with my kid and just not at all in my head. It's like
Yeah.
kids have such an easy time with that it's like I can learn so much from them. It's like I wish I could take that crazy stuff I'm thinking about in my head and just let it go and just be in that kid like place. So I
Right.
learn a lot from them as well. So I would say those are the biggest things that help me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love everything that you said, but I want to hit on like one very specific thing, which you said postpartum anxiety. And I'm starting to hear about that more and more, but I just find it
Yeah.
super interesting that, we hear about postpartum depression all the time. I mean, not all the time, but that's more
Yeah.
something we hear about and less about postpartum anxiety. And so can you just share like a teeny bit about that and how that is
Yeah.
different than postpartum depression? If
Yeah,
if you
sure.
can.
Yeah, no, for me, postpartum anxiety, it's like anxiety is normal when you have a new child. Like it's very healthy to have a little bit of anxiety, but when it gets to, at least for me, it got to a point where I would like obsess over everything. Oh my God, like, is he okay? I tracked every poop and everything. I
Mhm.
would obsess over how many ounces he was getting. What if he's not getting enough? It's just I was totally consumed by like fear and
Yeah.
just I wouldn't want other people to hold him. And it's like
Mhm.
when it gets to that level, it's not healthy,
Yeah.
and I had to get on medications. That's another thing I didn't mention coping wise. I had to get
Mhm.
on medication for that, and that made a huge difference. I went into therapy with my first son. That was the first time I actually went into therapy. Like I'm a therapist, and I never went into therapy really until then. So it's like I'm so grateful that I had that experience and
Yeah.
that I got help for it. And this second time around, I have a 4-month old. Like I was like, I'm doing this like right away because I don't want to go
Mhm.
to that place.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, a lot of the postpartum anxiety, it's like just overblown fears, like having catastrophic thinking about your baby and
Mhm.
something horrible happening. And there's like different types of postpartum anxiety too. There's like postpartum OCD and different
Oh,
things like
wow.
that as well. I don't think I had so much of that, but yeah, it was not fun.
Yeah.
It sounds very intense.
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, especially if you were already an anxiety warrior and now you're literally taking care of small children and their lives are literally in your hands. And so of course that's going to heighten your
Oh,
anxiety.
yeah.
So
Yes.
it just seems logical to me. Well,
Yeah.
not fun, I guess, but logical.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful that you were able to learn from your first pregnancy and your experience
Yep.
with postpartum anxiety after that. And then here you are 4 months in, 4-month old, and you're
Doing
just
it.
like, I got all the things, I have all the
Yeah.
tools. And sometimes that's so great. Like that's so wonderful to hear from. That's why we love doing this, because we just have the opportunity to talk to so many people who have learned so much about themselves or are in the process of learning so much about themselves. And more information can hopefully only serve to help. So, and I love to, if I could just head on quickly, I love that you brought up some of the little joys that I think so many times when we ask this question, people go straight for like I do, daily yoga, or those things are great, right? Or I make sure I do, I talk to my therapist. Like, again, those are wonderful things that we think everyone should be doing, at least sometimes.
Right.
But I love that you brought up just like aromatherapy in the shower.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
those little things that
Mhm.
really just bring you joy that might serve to soothe. So I just
Absolutely. Especially when you have a busy life and you have kids running around, like you can't set aside, I couldn't set aside to do yoga every day. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I would love to, but you got
that's
to
just
fit
where
it
my
in where you
brain
can.
went. Just where my brain went in the example. But like, yeah, I mean, you wind up hearing, or people sometimes they feel like they want to share like the really obvious good things that they do to cope with their anxiety. And so I love when our guests share things like watch Netflix.
Yeah.
Because it just feels so
Absolutely.
honest. It just
Yeah.
feels so honest. All right. So what would you say your relationship is to your anxiety right now?
I would say my relationship is much better than it used to be. Like I understand it's a thing that I have. I try to embrace it more and understand and have more compassion for myself, and knowing that, man, like you have this anxiety, but it doesn't have to own you. Like I can feel the sensations in my body. Even like in this interview, it's like I feel a little sweaty under my armpits,
Mhm.
like I
Oh,
feel a
we're
little
always
like
sweaty.
anxiety. Yeah, it's like, whoa, it's getting hot in here. No, it's my anxiety. But instead of like being ashamed of it now, I'm more like, okay, this is all right. Like these people I'm in good company. They know what's going on. They're experiencing it too. So it's less of this like shameful thing. And my relationship is much more embracing and going, okay, I don't want you to take over me, but you're not going to take me down. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to take, but it's okay to experience you. Like some level of anxiety is good. It's a motivator. I remember being in college and going, wow, like they were talking about like test anxiety, and like a certain amount of anxiety is important because it actually motivates you. Because if you have no anxiety, you don't care about the test. You're not going to study for it. And then it gets to a point where it's like, whoa, it's like way up here. And then you can't even think straight. So I try to see it as like, okay, anxiety in moderation is actually pretty cool and it's okay.
Yeah. Which
I
is
love
like
that.
bringing it back to the pendulum. It's like you found your balance in your
Yeah.
relationship to anxiety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So good. So good. I love that. I mean, you've talked about this the whole time, or you bounced around it the whole time. It's just like how anxiety is a motivator, can be a motivator, can be a tool.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it feels very empowering when you talk about it that way.
Yeah.
All right. So you could go back in time and visit yourself. What kind of advice would you give her?
I would say it's okay and that you're not alone. That your insecurities and your fears are so okay and so normal, and you don't have to hide and you don't have to be fearful and be embarrassed. Like I wish I would have known those things, that I can be myself. I can say what I want. I can be goofy. I can be silly. I can be awkward, and that's all okay. Like I just so badly wish that little girl knew that, and she didn't. Like she really didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I would say. And just learning, and being in the mental health field and meeting other people like you guys, or it's like I hear my story over and over and over again, and it's like it's such a validation that like I'm not alone, and that this thing it's kind of part of the human experience, and it's not something to be ashamed of. So I was just very ashamed, and I wish I would have known there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like what you're experiencing is not necessarily normal per se, but it's so relatable, and a lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Beautifully said. All right. Last question before we have some fun and lightning round.
Lightning round.
Get ready, lady. Okay. What does being an anxiety warrior mean to you?
What is an anxiety warrior? It means just doing it every day and just pushing through and knowing that it doesn't have to take you over. Um, and it's like facing each situation and saying, I can do this. And just being your own cheerleader, reaching out to other anxiety warriors and just knowing that I can tackle things. My anxiety is not me. I have anxiety, but it doesn't have to own you and it doesn't have to prevent you from living your life. Like if I had let my anxiety if I lived my life by what my anxiety told me to do, I wouldn't do anything. I would literally sit on my couch and watch Netflix. I wouldn't talk to anybody. Certainly wouldn't be talking to you guys on this. No way in hell. So it's like, I definitely think it's about pushing through that fear and doing what you want to do, like at your core, what's important to you, and not letting your anxiety prevent that. And I can still carry it along and do all the things I want to do.
I love it. I love it.
So good.
I love that image of the cheerleader, like the cheerleading warrior.
Yeah.
I got you. Be aggressive.
Be assertive. Assertive. That's right.
Be assertive. Be assertive.
What would our anxiety warrior cheerleading uniform look like? I feel like we need to work this out in our heads.
We do.
Yeah, obviously it would have our colors, purple and teal, but I'm not sure how they'd line up. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much for giving us so much delicious insight into who you are and sharing very relatable things and tools for our warriors to hopefully be able to hold on to and maybe even try for themselves. So, are you ready for the lightning round? Okay.
Here we go.
She's like, oh my God, I can't do it. You got this, Christine. Okay. So Abby and I are going to go back and forth. We're each going to ask you just a fun, silly, lighthearted, get to know Christine type question. And you can take a pause, take a beat before you answer. You do not need to rush into your answer.
Okay.
And it's just going to be a handful of questions and we'll have some fun. Sound good?
Sounds good.
You got
right.
this. Okay.
You going first or I'm going first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first this week. Okay, Christine, can you please deliver a quote that you love? Now, it could be a quote from a movie, a song, from, a prayer journal, or whatever it is, something that either motivates you or makes you laugh or just inspires you, lights you up. Deliver a quote that you love.
I'm horrible at remembering any kind of quotes or anything.
Oh, good. Butcher a quote that you love.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know, just in the simplicity of this quote, but it's feel the fear, but do it anyways. I would say that because I love the simplicity of that and knowing that you can feel your fears and just press on and it doesn't have to hold you back. So
yeah,
it's kind of boring, but I like that.
No, I love it, especially because it's acknowledging it, right? It's not pretending it doesn't exist. It's acknowledging the human side and not letting it hold you back. Love it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. One down.
If you could teleport anywhere for a day, fiction or nonfiction, you could, teleport to a place in Europe, or you could teleport to a place in a book or a movie or a TV show, where would you go and spend a day?
I would say it would be Hawaii. It's always been and that's another thing I should have said earlier with coping stuff. I like to put backgrounds on YouTube backgrounds of places, and Hawaii is my thing. It's the beautiful waves and the palm trees. And it's I just love that Hawaii vibe, the tiki relaxation, just sipping on a virgin for me, pina colada, and just hanging out by the beach is the best.
You can't go wrong with any kind of pina colada. That's my opinion, but I also feel like it's the right one.
Yeah.
Delicious. Sounds good. I love Hawaii. Hawaii is such a beautiful state. Okay. If you were a car, which one would you be and why?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
That's the goal. Good job, Margot.
A car. I don't know. That Barbie cars come into mind, that little pink Jeep. that little pink Barbie Jeep. Like I loved that as a kid. And I remember zooming around the yard in it. And I like had my cat ride next to me in it, my cat Buster, and we just cruised around in that Barbie pink Jeep. So I'll say that.
I love it.
I'm so jealous. I always wanted that Jeep. My parents never got me that Jeep.
No, I wanted actually any car as a kid.
I didn't want to. It's like I wanted it in theory, but I didn't actually want it because like all the warriors that have been listening to our show, and Abby knows that like I didn't start driving till I was in my early 20s because I had a lot of anxiety around driving. But yeah, so I think in theory I was like, "Ooh, that's so cool." But then like I think my parents somehow they knew in the back of their brains like she's never going to drive this thing. So they made the right call. Actually, that sounds good. I like it.
I like it. If you could win a game show, any game show from the 90s, game show from now, what game show would you want to be known for winning?
Oh man. Maybe like The Price is Right or something.
Yes.
Like that.
So good. Everybody's go-to.
With Bob Barker or new with whoever, I don't even know who's hosting.
Is it Drew Carey? Drew Carey, I think, hosts now, right?
Yeah.
Bob Barker. You gotta go with you gotta go with OG.
I mean, he was all about spaying and neutering your pets.
That's a good thing.
Bob Barker would say that at the end of every Price is Right.
Oh, I never watched the show. I know. I know. I mean, like not literally never. Like I saw it like 3 times.
Oh my gosh. All right. I grew up like watching
Price is Right. Adam did too. My husband, I feel like most people around our age grew up watching it, especially when they were homesick from school. It was like the go-to. Always on. I was like, I had my other.
You always wanted to spin that wheel, and you always knew you were going to get the dollar.
The wheel was dope, I will say.
Yeah.
The wheel was dope. Okay. I'm actually going to riff. I'm going to screw my last question and riff off of this question. So if you could win, okay, any amount of money, just like a ridiculous amount of money, but you had to use it for only 3 things. What would they be?
Interesting. Okay. I would say college funds for my 2 boys. You can only use it for a few things. I would say
3 things.
3 things. Okay. So paying off my mortgage, I guess. God, this is so boring. College funds. And I'm like,
so
this
practical.
Is so boring. All right. And my cool one would be like an epic vacation, like a Hawaiian vacation where I got like the spa and all of that relaxation and hiking and all of that. Just like the Hawaii, like to the max.
You could own a home. You could choose to own a home there. I said any amount of money.
Well, shoot, then maybe I'll just buy myself a compound, in Hawaii, and just have like a masseuse on deck. In the house.
There you go. We took it to the next level.
I like that
you
better.
weren't thinking broad enough.
I guess
go with the practicality. I'm with you there. That makes sense to me. But then like, you're not just going to go on a one-time vacation to Hawaii. No, you're going to own parts of Hawaii.
No, that's even better.
There you go.
I like it. Thank you for upgrading me on that.
I love it too.
We all need to dream bigger, people. That's what I'm learning these days.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Good.
So last question. So, what was your favorite theme song, TV show theme song growing up? It could be, it was also your favorite TV show.
Growing up would be I Love Lucy.
I
love that show.
Me too. Obsessed. Such a good show.
I was so into it. And that was like my little, like before bed, I would put the timer on my TV and I would just let the I Love Lucy runs on there.
I feel like I'm looking in a mirror right now because I legit did that exact same
Oh my
thing,
God.
Christine.
Nick at Night.
Baby. I grew up, my mom and I watched, I didn't watch cartoons as a kid. I didn't watch kids shows. I watched old shows with my mom. Mary Tyler Moore, Dick Van Dyke, Taxi.
Yes.
I Love Lucy, Rhoda. I mean, all of that. That was my childhood. So
absolutely. There's something so comforting about those old shows. And just the other day I found these like I Love Lucy postcards. Like my son found them in my pile of stuff and I was like looking through them. I'm like, oh, I got these at like Universal Studios when I was a kid. I was like so pumped for the I Love Lucy postcards.
Oh, wow. I love it. My heart is just smiling from ear to ear right now. It's crazy. I don't think I've ever talked to anyone else that did that exact thing as a child. So I'm like,
That's
feeling very
awesome.
seen.
I love it.
All right. Before we let you go, that was so good. Before we let you go, do you have a win of the week to share?
Win of the week. Okay.
Big or
Probably.
small?
I would say this morning. So, part of my postpartum anxiety stuff is all about sleep and kids sleeping and are they going to sleep on time and when are they going to wake up? Like, it's like the control issue there. My little one woke up this morning at 5 a.m., which normally would have put me in like a tailspin. I would have freaked out, but I just like rolled with it and I like took over and I took care of the baby. And, I just like was able to have a good day and it led to this. And I had a great conversation with you guys. So, one of the biggest things for me, it's like my catastrophic thinking says, oh my God, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm going to explode. No, I'm not. I'm fine. And I had a great day. So it's like when I can have moments where, I feel out of control because of some circumstance, whether it's my kids or whatever, and I could wake up, deal with it, face the day, and still be okay. Like that's a win for me, for sure.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Such a good win. I love when wins are seemingly small,
but they're so huge.
They're so huge.
Your whole day is not ruined. Like, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for Christine for coming on the podcast. We had so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate your time. And if I could just help one person feel a little less like ashamed of their anxiety experience, like I think that would be awesome. So I appreciate you guys. What you guys are doing is really, really awesome. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. Woo, such a great conversation. I loved re-listening to our chat with Christine. She's just so sweet and down to earth. And she was just a very calming presence.
Yes.
Yeah. She has great energy. I think like I could see why people would want to be counseled by her.
Yeah.
She's just a very good energy.
And she gets it, like
right.
When you live the life, you get it. You get that empathy piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were some of our takeaways from this chat?
Yeah. Well, one of them for me is, the story about how she choked, right, when she was eating, and how that like greatly impacted her. And it changed her eating habits. It changed her relationship with food. And yet like no one was like, hey, what happened all of a sudden? One day you're eating loads of foods and the next day you just want mashed potatoes. And, for me, it's just like, it's again, that just reminder, like I say it all the time, but all behaviors communicating something, right? And like that was communicating like a fear of eating and choking and dying or whatever. And, I just feel like it's such an important reminder that when behavior changes quickly, the people in that person's life, it's up to us to be like, hey, what happened? Like,
right. It's a warning sign.
Yes. Like talk about it, right? Don't ignore it. Don't assume it'll just pass. Sometimes it does, but it's worth being acknowledged and trying to learn from that person to understand their experience.
Especially if it's a child, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and maybe parents aren't always going to be the one, but I'm sure that other people, classroom teacher, her friends at school, like there might've been other people that might've observed this change in her eating habits. That from that early age may have been like, okay, let's retrace our steps here and find out like where this originated and what we can do about it. If there's something we can do about it, what is it? And let's do it together. Yeah. That really stuck out to me too. And in our call, even before we recorded, just like, wow, that sounds like it was a really traumatic experience. And then of course manifested itself in for years, not just in the whole dealing with swallowing thing, but then just surrounding like her relationship with food, as you just said, which I think so many people can relate to, or maybe, I'll speak for myself and say, I've always had a really complicated relationship to diet and diet culture and food and what's healthy and what's considered healthy. And I've never calorie counted before. And she talked a little bit about that too, in her eating disorder, but I definitely have had the desire to learn more about calories that I wish I didn't have that in my brain, like at all. I wish that thought didn't even enter my brain, but I know it's because of media and society and expectations for women specifically that, I think hopefully I know she's not alone in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me too, and it came up throughout, was how motivating and how energizing, even she's even said anxiety is energy. And that really landed for me, because it's like she was using it as a tool. It's like, we're always using anxiety as like, well, we have this thing and it weighs us down and it's heavy and exhausting and awful most of the time, but it also has driven us to do a lot of scary things. And it's not the only thing that about anxiety. Anxiety isn't just awful. It can be wielded for good and for power and empowerment. And that really, really stood out for me in our chat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. Like, when I experience anxiety, I feel jittery. I feel edgy. I mean, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel like I need to lay on the floor. I do feel exhausted, but sometimes I do have that like sensations of a lot of energy and I need to put it somewhere. Right. And like in those moments, like we can either like sit in the discomfort or like turn our attention to like, okay, how can I use this as a motivating factor? And so that really stuck with me too, is like just the reframe that anxiety can lead to drive and to motivation. And it's not always something that just holds us back.
Yes. Yeah. I think that a lot of our guests have said notes of that in the past. It's like, I have this thing, it's with me all the time, and it can be a detriment at times, and I find it annoying and I wish it would go away. But while it can be comfortably uncomfortable or very, very familiar, it can also be powerful.
Yeah.
So like, and it doesn't have to be powerful just for the bad. It could be powerful for positive change. And I loved learning more. We talked a little bit with our previous guest, Lauren Chadoff, about postpartum anxiety, but I loved learning more about what that is and how that differs from postpartum depression and what that might look like and feel like for moms out there.
Yeah.
Thought that was a really interesting part of the call that, I don't know, I'm enjoying learning more about.
Right. Right. And the fact that there's like obvious help out there, right? Because she had learned about postpartum anxiety with her first child. And so when she had her second, she was like, let me get on top of this. Right. And so that getting therapy helps her with the postpartum anxiety. It's like there's that awareness piece, but she's also found something that actually helps, because I mean, it sounds exhausting to, count the amount of poops a day and, how many ounces every day. And, and I know like, there's a lot of information, like a kid should be doing this at this time, at this age, and this and this.
Right. And, milestones and stuff.
Yeah. And if you have that postpartum anxiety, could just be like super controlling and exhausting. And then you really miss out on being with your kid.
I love too, that with keeping going with this part of our chat, that she had really, it seemed as though she kind of landed in her body though, right? Yeah. Like in a really positive way after having her children, certainly after her first, but then sounds like definitely after she had her most recent child, who's only 4 months old, that she was just like, okay, I really know what I'm doing now. Yeah. And she's been able to be more present and more connected to them because she's taken the time to learn about it, to learn about what her postpartum anxiety is. And so sometimes we've said over and over again, when we're able to label our experience or just learn about our experience, it can take away some of that heavy feeling, some of that anxiety. So I love that.
Yeah. Another thing for me, even though we didn't talk that much about childhood, like it always, like when people talk about their childhood, it always like sticks with me. And there was like 2 parts she mentioned in her childhood. And one was like in her household, there was that constant state of worry. And for her, that was normal. And so when she went to other people's houses and it wasn't like that like restlessness, that like to-do list, like all that stuff that wasn't in the other family's houses, it felt like something was like off or wrong, or it was less comfortable. Right. And so, part of the takeaway for me is just how the way we act is what kids learn. I mean, that's really it. It's not what we say. It's not like, because if like the grownups are saying relax, but then the grownups are like, constantly in this restless, like never ending to do state, then the kids are learning the to do state, not the relaxing.
Yes.
And then the other piece that really connected for me was also like how much kids look to grownups for answers. And so when she was in school and she like had this thing with her throat, and what the school nurse said was that she was lactose intolerant, it's like, I don't know, like that just really stuck with me, because like for me, the way I interpret that is, and I know this was, you know, a bit ago and we're more hip to mental health, but like the school nurse was just dismissive. It was like, oh, you have this sensation, you probably have this allergy, you know.
And she made it into a physical medical condition, not an emotional one.
Yes. And like, again, it's like, I guess my takeaway is just really like finding the time to listen to people when challenges arise for them, even if it's their throat feels tight. Because anxiety manifests physically, but that doesn't mean that that's what needs to be, you know, looked at is the physical. Like a lot of kids communicate their anxiety with physical stuff when really what's going on is in the inside.
Yeah. Another takeaway from me too was we didn't really get into it too much in our conversation. It was more in our pre-recorded call. She talked a lot about being in community, and this has come up many times with many of our guests, and how talking to other mental health counselors, right, in the places that she was working, and talking to her AA sponsor, and just going and reaching out to people in her recovery community, and how supportive that was to her. So I wanted to make sure I hit on that, because I know that you know, we don't always get to every single thing that we cover in our calls in our interview. And I just thought that like, just yet another reminder that reaching out to people that understand, people that have compassion, that have great track records for listening, people in the mental health field, therapists, right? Like all of these things that we're constantly hearing from all of our guests can be so valuable to helping us with our everyday, you know, and the big or the small.
It ties into her advice that she would give herself. You're not alone, right? Like you're okay. You're not alone. And that's it. Because once we know we have community and we speak about what's, you know, happening on the inside, we realize like other people can relate. Other people have similar experiences. We're not alone in this.
Yes. So good. This was such a great conversation. We hope all of you warriors loved it as much as we loved having it. Thank you, Christine, again, for being a guest with us. So warriors, we would love to hear from you. If you want to reach out for any reason, you think you'd be an awesome fit as a guest, you have topic ideas for us, you have questions, thoughts on the podcast, we'd love to receive an email from you. You can hit us up at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. You can also hop over to Instagram and join our Instagram fam. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. And if you have 2 seconds, which I know you do, right now, take your phone back out, head over to Apple Podcasts, smash that 5-star review button, make sure that you're following and subscribe to our podcast, and leave us a little encouragement, some words of love, nice little review for us so we can happy cry. I know I'm really good at doing. And finally, you all know, especially if you're with our Instagram fam, and if you're not, head over there and join so you can see our kick-ass merch that we have available for yourself or your fellow anxiety warriors or the anxiety warriors in your life. There is just a ton of swag that you can pick up to be fun in your life. Some 80s and 90s style graphics on anything from mugs to t-shirts and journals and stickers and all that good stuff. So we hope that you will support our show by picking up something fun for yourself or your fellow anxiety warriors.
Let them know. Let them know you are an anxiety warrior.
Yes.
Part of a community.
Part of a community. Exactly. That's what we want to be all the time. It's just not alone. Right.
Yeah.
Wise words from Christine. So that link will be in our show notes. Jump over, catch yourself something. And thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We're so grateful you're here.
Till next time.